Thank you for the introduction, Sharon. Thank you for inviting me to participate on this panel with such a privileged and people that I've worked with for a long time. It's really, it's an honor. So good evening all. I'm delighted to be here today to discuss the Washington Conference and how far we've traveled in the last 20 years. It feels like only yesterday that we gathered in Washington to discuss art restitution, then still relatively a new topic, certainly at the high governmental echelons represented there. The focus at the December 1998 conference was more on Holocaust-era insurance claims, banking, issues of communal property, as well as remembrance. The renewed focus on art restitution was only a couple of years old, and I must tip my hat to Ambassador Eizenstat. It really was an achievement to get 44 countries to agree the 11 Washington principles on Nazi-confiscated art, what would become the bedrock foundation of the next 2 decades of art restitution work. I was privileged to participate at the pre-Washington Conference Art Roundtable, as Sharon mentioned, in my role as Deputy Director of Holocaust Claims Processing Office. I had started my job with the HCPO, as the office is referred to, a little short of a year earlier. The office had been established as an 18-month project to assist claimants with a wide range of long unresolved Holocaust-related claims. The bulk initially were claims against the Swiss banks, claims against the European insurance companies soon followed, but by December 1998, there were already an ever-increasing number of claimants pursuing lost, looted, or stolen artwork. At the time of the 1998 conference, the HCPO had received more than 60 art claims, I believe, and close to 300 telephone inquiries from families in 8 countries and 17 states. Both Ambassador Eizenstat and I are just back from Berlin, as are a number of people in the room, and Sharon, as well as Lynn Rother on the panel. We took part in the international conference hosted by the German Lost Art Foundation about the legacy of the Washington Conference, its art restitution principles, and how the hopes and aspirations of the Washington Conference principles have been implemented. In 1998, when we convened, we were grounded by the desire to tackle the issue of art looting, and this ultimately led to the formation of national bodies in several countries tasked with reviewing their national and institutional collections. And Stu touched on this. The Washington Principles established the litmus test that resolutions to claims should be just and fair. In the United States, again, as Stu mentioned, the Association of Art Museum Directors had already issued guidelines for museums to handle Holocaust-era claims. What was then called the American Association of Museums soon issued guidelines in 1999, and the Art Dealers Association of America eventually issued guidelines for its members. In many, many respects, the Washington Principles have been successful. They've provided the impetus for our art restitution efforts and a lens through which we have viewed claims handling and art restitution. But I think what perhaps we underestimated at the Washington Conference was the scale and the scope, and indeed the complexity of the challenge that lay ahead of us and still does. Stu has discussed his impressions of our field's successes and failures over the last 20 years, and I'd like now to focus my remarks to what I have seen from my vantage point at Christie's and the continuing challenges that lie ahead. We in the international art market find ourselves on the front lines of responding to the legacy of the voracious and unfathomable looting and displacement of art during World War II and the Holocaust. It's self-evident that the art market, Christie's, other auction houses, dealers, museums, and collectors need to be constantly vigilant and alert to restitution issues. We at Christie's sell tens of thousands of works each year, notable because of the very large number of works we handle, not just for their cumulative financial value. The art market is a key net for catching looted art and gives us an almost unique position to contribute to the work of restitution. We receive and must respond to dozens of claims each year, and in some cases, we are the ones to find possible signs of looting, causing us to initiate the resolution process. The thousands of items we look at each year cross nearly all categories of art: paintings, furniture, books, drawings, porcelain, and so on for potential issues. To do this, we have an experienced team with considerable knowledge and expertise and a body of information and documentation that has grown over the last 20 years, indeed more than 20 years. We might use up to a dozen online databases or sources to help us. When we identify a potentially problematic item, we research it until we can draw a conclusion about its status, or we've made a reasonable assessment of the risk involved in selling it. This work is difficult. A painting's appearance can change with heavy restoration. There may be a lack of tangible history for more financially modest works of art, such as works on paper, which historically had limited market value, but may be viewed today as very special. Or quite simply, there's a risk of confusion because the original description is vague and artists frequently do multiple works, sometimes with similar titles. So despite our best endeavors, we will inevitably miss things. Because many of the databases we use are active and being updated, because numerous private archives remain unavailable for research, and because the research remains subjective in interpretation, a work thought to be clear of potential issues at one point in time can later be found to in fact be problematic when new information comes to light. 20 years ago, when the Washington Principles were drawn up, we all, or most, thought in terms of Nazi confiscation. Today, our understanding of restitution claims means we're not just looking for artworks that were clearly confiscated and recorded by Nazi looting units like the ERR, Alfred Rosenberg's Special Task Force, but we also must consider whether something may have been sold under duress, as Stu discussed, because persecuted individuals became impoverished and needed money to pay flight taxes, for example, or to fund a new life beyond the Nazis' reach. The restitution cases we deal with on a day-to-day basis are generally for artworks that are in private hands and come to us as auctioneers, but force us to become intermediaries and facilitators of amicable settlements. Many of the remaining majority of artworks we would all deem problematic are not always clear-cut cases. So there are a great number of obstacles to overcome in convincing private collectors or private entities to deal forthrightly with an issue. This is often a difficult process, particularly if there's a sale in process and the collector faces a potential financial loss. And many collectors who have bought artworks in good faith and believe they have good title do not see it as their personal responsibility to make amends for the past. We do, however, have to find strategies to overcome this reluctance so that the difficult cases don't all become protracted lawsuits. Christie's method has been to promote fair and amicable resolutions, often by pragmatic settlements. Not all agree with this approach, but Christie's has resolved or returned close to 50 artworks in the last 5 to 6 years alone, and we've successfully handled around 200 claims since 1998. To give you a flavor, I wanted to share a recent case with you involving this painting of a scholar by Salomon Konink. Some of you may have read about the Konink matter in the press. The painting was consigned to us from a private collection in Chile. When the painting arrived, it went through the standard process of cataloging and vetting, and during this process, we flagged it as having been one of those works famously confiscated from the collection of Adolphe Schloss in France during the occupation. The Schloss collection, one of the largest in pre-war France, was known for its selection of old master paintings and had been coveted and targeted by the Nazis from the start. The collection was intended for Hitler's Linz Museum and after seizure was stored at the Führerbau in Munich, where it suffered a second looting. With the fall of the regime imminent in April 1945, the Nazi guards posted to protect the building deserted, and there followed a night of looting by local residents. We don't know exactly what happened to the Konink, but it turned up on the Munich art market in 1952 in the hands of Walter Andreas Hofer. Hofer had been one of the key agents for Hermann Goering during the war. He was convicted in absentia by the French courts for his art crimes, but did not serve his sentence. Hence, he was free to sell this painting to the father of our Chilean consignor. Once our research uncovered this claim, we sought to discuss the matter with the Chilean consignor and begin the process of facilitating an amicable resolution of the claim, as is our usual practice. Instead, the family pursued the return of the picture to Chile despite knowledge of the painting's looted past. At that point, we reached out to the FBI to investigate the matter. When the FBI's investigation confirmed our research and understanding of the Schloss claim, the U.S. Attorney's Office commenced a forfeiture action, which neither Chile nor our consignor looked to be contesting. We've just resolved by settlement another painting, Peter Code, which we offered for auction in London Friday. Again, our routine review using the Lost Art database identified it as a painting formerly in the collection of Dr. Arno Siegfeld, a trader in iron from Berlin, until he was forced to flee to the Netherlands in 1939. He was also forced to pay the Nazi flight taxes to leave Germany. After the invasion and occupation of the Netherlands, a small collection of old master paintings he had been able to take with him were confiscated from their storage place in Amsterdam and forcibly sold by the Nazi authorities. This painting turned up on the Austrian art market in the 1950s. By a quirk of fate, it was acquired there by a young Jewish couple whose family ultimately consigned it to Christie's. They too had fled their homes and met while in exile, returning to Austria after the war to restart their lives. Obviously, breaking the news of our findings was difficult, but the consignor was graceful and responsive, and likewise the Siegfeld estate was open to discussion. Hence, we could find a compromise leading to the sale of the painting. But it's not just a question of addressing Jewish losses, as our work does not happen in a vacuum. In Germany and in Eastern Europe, many of the losses were from government museums, library, archive, and other public collections. We've been involved in returning a dozen missing artworks to German museums, also to Poland and to a Russian museum. The most recent return was of a Tenier drawing, modest in size and value, to the state museums in Dresden, again identified through our vetting process. In the run-up to the Washington conference, the possibility of resolving exactly this category of claim was discussed at the roundtable. I think it was Tom Klein, who's in the audience, who was then representing German cultural institutions, who raised the question of whether German museum losses should stand on an equal or similar footing to Jewish art claims. The issue gained little traction 20 years ago, but the growth in claims from German, Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish museums has underlined the need for us to be vigilant in this respect too. Indeed, how we have responded in the art market and museums to Nazi-era and Second World War-related claims has established an approach and practice that we are seeing much more broadly implemented these days with regards to cultural property claims. Very recently, the baton has also been picked up in responding to colonial-era looting, as you mentioned. At Christie's, we're proud of our commitment to Nazi-era restitution and our success in resolving issues when we can. It feels like we're busier than ever. We're receiving an increasing number of queries which relate to artworks we have sold in the past, including artworks we've also sold comparatively recently, post-Washington conference. These are claims where we completed thorough due diligence at the time of the sale, but new information has subsequently come to light that has altered the artwork's status. I recall at the Washington conference there was much discussion about the likely duration of restitution as a concern and whether sunset clauses would be needed to draw it to an end. In fact, 20 years on, I think the Berlin conference underlined that there's still a lot of work yet to be done in Holocaust restitution, and Berlin convened not only we, I hate to say it, old-timers, but also a second generation of researchers and practitioners. Ultimately, the message from Berlin was mixed. For all the success stories served up and the recommitments, there was plenty of dissent and criticism. How far have we come? Why is there still so much to do? Do we share common goals? Do we have the tools to do the work? Should we upgrade the Washington principles? If so, how do we strengthen them? There was criticism and consensus in equal measure. During the conference and coffee breaks, it transpired, for example, that many people are working on new definitions of looted art, broader than just confiscation, as we've been discussing, and clearer definitions are needed. But what happens when competing sets of definitions are presented? Do we all have a voice in shaping and critiquing definitions? Will they set a standard, or will they be applied locally and selectively? Do we have a common and uniform approach to claims? The question of incentives for private collectors in possession of looted art to come forward was raised again, but what concrete suggestions are there? Again, another perennial topic: how do we centralize, manage, and make accessible information on Nazi-era losses? Not a new question, and one that was discussed in Washington in 1998, but the idea of a central database has not yet materialized. We still hope for centralized online sources, and the Commission for Art Recovery is leading the way with its Jewish Digital Cultural Recovery Project, which Mark Mazurowski, who's here, is helping to develop. Stu mentioned this project as well. Its vision is significant. To conclude, Edmund Duval, artist, author of The Hero with the Amber Eyes, and descendant of the Efrusi family victimized in Vienna, addressed the Berlin Conference on the second day. He spoke very movingly about the places and spaces laid empty by the Holocaust and the need to reclaim, indeed to reverse restitute Jewish families and their art to the places that they had once occupied. It was an important and centering note to a conference that had often veered towards the political or abstract. There were also other family members, descendants of other Jewish families, who spoke emotionally about their own experiences. Many of these stories were about modest artworks, book, ephemera, the real fabric of Jewish homes of the time. One family member, a great-granddaughter of Marcus Heinemann of Lüneburg, spoke of how the restitution process brought her a new worldwide family, the scattered descendants of her ancestor. Another spoke of how the acknowledgement of her family's existence and loss might have been enough, but also the steps that the museum's researchers and town officials had taken to welcome, hear, and embrace the present-day family was so very welcome too. And when all else is said and done, it's this message that's the most important and significant in our work. Telling and hearing the stories of the families lost and displaced during the Holocaust is paramount. And to echo what I said in December at NARA, December 1998 in NARA, remembering and commemoration is paramount. Art is a tangible memory, and through art restitution, restoring and returning art, we can help do this. Thank you.